Hey, greetings everyone. So, welcome to this edition of Monday with DioWarriors, the DioWarriors Night Edition. Just want to do something a little bit different tonight, and instead of being so, focused on production, the CAD stuff, the printing stuff, things like that, wanted to just kind of sit back a little bit tonight and basically close up the day with last moment prints. I got some items for order that's going out tomorrow. And so I'm doing a last moment check to make sure everything is together. And there's one part that I need to print right now. It's originally it's for laser cutting, but since I'm low on materials, I am trying to see if I can uh, do this piece as 3D printed instead of laser cutting it. So, bear with me and I'll get that done too. I'm also, just kind of in the mood to kind of talk about this, I guess you could say, the state of collecting action figures, things like that. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on, and I kind of feel a little bit out of it in a way because, for example, Joy Toy has been doing a lot on their diorama stuff, and I haven't really gotten into the Joy Toy Dio things yet. I want to order them, but I've just been so busy I haven't gotten around to do any of that. It's kind of hot. So, anyways, tonight's a great night for just sitting around and you know doing some stuff with figures, model building, and I kind of miss all of that. It's like I've been so involved with the printing that I haven't really done much anything else. I've been trying to distract myself sometimes playing Star Trek Online, but I'm not a gamer, so I don't really play games. And so yeah. So anyway, I am currently um about to copy a file and about to move things to the printer and get that thing printing. Kind of winding down right now. I had some prints earlier on that printer that was printing, and that's finished. I have to remove it off the bill plate, and right now I gotta verify. Is that USB on? USB drive I. Open a new window. What is these? Suddenly, just got some like itchy eyes and all that. When you least expect it, an allergy occurs. But maybe that's a good point to kind of begin breaking the ice on this type of format that I kind of want to do. I just want to do something where I could just sit back and just talk about figures and things like that in a very easy and relaxed way. So I'm just going to talk about some things and I will check for comments in a little while. Unfortunately, I'm still blocked from going live directly on YouTube. On Facebook. So I have to go in a roundabout way and just share the links uh, on Facebook to the YouTube channel. So it's a bit inconvenient. And see, right now I'm looking for a file that I just made. Okay, there it is. And I need to copy the file. Copy. And that should be done. Okay, great. So earlier today I was doing some CAD stuff and for another video. And I was thinking about some of the items that I was talking about. And on that video, I was talking a lot about Singapore and when I was younger, how I used to play around with G.I. Joes. And I didn't elaborate too much about that, but I was thinking that that would be something good to talk about here. The problem with these little bitty SD cards is that sometimes they don't want to go into the little slot properly. And let me get this print going. There's the folder. Come on. Get me out. Print. Okay. There. Okay. So, okay, now that print is starting. So what I was talking about earlier, I was just mentioning about a few things about Singapore, and that originally I'm from New Orleans, and I was reminiscing really about the weather because I heard some birds chirping outside, and it kind of brought back some memories. And I don't know how y'all used to play G.I. Joe when you were little. For me, back in the 80s, so we had this house with a nice backyard and a lot of grass and just some wooden fences all around and some trees and things. And back then, had two particular friends, neighbors, and they were also more or less around the same age. And we all liked, Star Wars, and we were collecting the Star Wars action figures and things. Then, when G.I. Joe came out, we switched gears and went with G.I. Joe. They were more articulated, and that was fun. Um, because Star Wars back then was just 5 points articulation, and the GI Joes, they had an O-ring torso section, and but they were basically well articulated all around. And so what we used to do back then is when we bought the vehicles and things, we went to my backyard and we set up some bases. We built them out of bricks. We had some wood. Mostly we had a lot of bricks. And so we used to stack bricks and make these bases. And when I realized that my parents were not annoyed or anything like that, then the bases got larger and larger with more bricks. And of course, when we bought more vehicles, we needed more space to keep the vehicles. Eventually, we kind of went more on the Cobra side because Cobra, you can do all sorts of stuff, and so we ended up having these large structures out of bricks. And during times like 4th of July or New Year's, we used to stock up on fireworks. So we used to collect the small black cat firecrackers, the jumping jacks. We didn't really do much with the bottle rockets, but we had use for the smoke bombs, and we had something called a magic snake, which basically was a small black cylinder. You applied some flame, and it would expand, and it'll just come out and just kind of snake around, just this black carbon burn stuff, just slowly expanding. And we got these small little bitty firecrackers that were called ladyfingers. And if I could, it's maybe about 10 millimeters, or maybe more like 15 millimeters uh, long. And it was just a few millimeters diameter. But they made, for G.I. Joe back in those times, they made very good dynamite sticks. So they were red, they had, the fuse, everything. We used to kind of tie the fuse together in groups of threes or twos. And we had, our Joes packing dynamite. And so we used to do things like that. Some figures we didn't like more than others. Duke was one. He had this smile on his face, and that smile just annoyed us. And it didn't really bother me too much because I didn't have Duke. A friend of mine actually did, and one of the neighbors, and I don't know why, but he hated him. So Duke was always the getting captured, just like in the cartoon. Was always getting captured. But in our things, sometimes he'll have his Cobras execute Duke, things like that, or something along those lines like that. So it was, kind of funny because, next time we're out there, there's Duke again. And, like somehow he escaped, things like that. So, but we used to have fun. We used to do these massive bases, and we used to put not just the G.I. Joe vehicles and the toys together, but also with Star Wars. So we end up having this mixed match of things like tanks and Cobra Hiss tanks and water moccasins and things, and a Star Wars AT-AT, and a Rebel snow speeder, things along those lines like that. Sometimes we needed more people involved, civilians. We needed other figures involved, and so the Star Wars became more on the civilian side, and so. But that's how we used to play more or less. Um, some things got pretty elaborate. We did one particular base with the bricks. It was more like a big castle. It was kind of dug into the ground a bit, and they had raised sections, all indoors in one big structure. So we had indoor parking for the tanks and the Cobra stuns. We had an upper level, and that's where the figures stayed, and we had stockade, barracks, command center, things like that, all done in bricks and wood and things like that, and a heliport, places where we can launch a Rattler or a Claw. When Trouble Bubbles came out, we were getting those. Um, Very good times, and the ideas that were coming out for G.I. Joe, small vehicles for Cobras, made things very practical because, it's like these days, the trend is to try to move away from the 1/18 scale 4-inch figures and embrace 6-inch. And the companies are trying to make 6-inch into the collector's scale. And I really don't see that, mostly because if you're a collector, yeah, you want details and stuff like that. But with modern technologies and stuff, you can do a lot of details on the small size figures. And just like in the same way that you can do an amazing amount of details in fine scale models, 135 scale, 3000 scale, small little ship models. There's all sorts of you know ways you can appreciate small details, and the fine scale model industry is a great example of that. But speaking of models, I think back in the 80s was a really great decade of growing up. And there's a few people, I hope they're watching right now, because there's a few people out there that I talk to sometimes on the phone and things, and it's really fun to reminisce about how we grew up in the 80s and how we got introduced to things like anime. Um, yeah, that would be the best way to say it, because anime is kind of popular these days. Back in the 80s, it was harder to get. I remember before high school, not really having any idea about anime. Robotech came out. Before Robotech, there was Battle of the Planets, Star Blazers, and a few other titles like that. And a lot of them were not really done really well. Battle of the Planets I remember seeing it for the first time and the only time. It was broadcast like in the evening, maybe around 6:30 or 7. I think around 7 or 7:30 p.m. And I remember my father changing the channel, and suddenly there's Battle of the Planets, some cartoon thing. I was interested. I wanted to see that, but TVs back then were expensive. We didn't have like TVs in every room. So my dad was kind enough to put a little bit on. When there was a commercial, he'd change the channel, and we ended up watching something else. So that was, I think, was poorly planned and put it on prime time or something, where it competes with what people normally do and watch. People tend to do habits. Sit down at around dinner time, you have food and things, you go watch TV, you want to see your normal broadcasts or normal shows. And then to interrupt that with a cartoon, that's not going to appeal to a lot of the adults, And so it became an issue of me asking, can we watch this? And then when there was a commercial, it was changed to regular programming. And then when regular programming had a commercial, then I was like fighting to try to get back to watch Battle of the Planets. So it was broken. And then later on, I started to find out that even the order of broadcast was not done well. It was like to be continued for the next day. And then so the next day would come, and I would be like, okay, well, where is it? How come it's not showing? In many cases, what I found out later, in many cases, um, the broadcast studios didn't take the Japanese animation in a serious way. They treated it like it was a cartoon, like Looney Tunes, a Bugs Bunny thing. And so when something else presented itself. They chose to broadcast that and not keep to regular schedules. Anyway, it was a mess. Um, when Robotech came out, though, I think it was handled better. Uh, Things were I know when that came out, they made a point to not to repeat errors in the past, and so something like Robotech was for me the introduction to anime, and that got my interest going. And then I started to. My brother was, he there was a in New Orleans at the time. There was a hobby store called Hub's Hobby. They still exist. They're just not in the same location from the '80s. And but in the '80s, of course, I wasn't driving, so my brother would take me to Hub Hobby, a serious hobby shop, and so we'll go across the river and everything, and go to their location. And it was, a very very nice store. I mean, it was full of models of all kinds. I mean, this is like the classic hobby store where all the model kits are tight, from floor to ceiling. And in ceiling, you got lots of stuff hanging, airplanes and things hanging from the ceiling, radio control stuff. We have counters, glass counters on display, lots of stuff from model kits to model jet engines to all sorts of other tools for modeling, fines, fine files, um, plastic I-beams, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Different kinds of putties, lots of choices on different kinds of paints. A good model ship section, car section, airplane section. But they also had HO scale figures or figurines. And I mean, gosh, you can get all sorts of stuff there. I started to collect World War II airplane models back then in 1/100 scale, and then I found that there was like an imported section on the other side of the store, and so we had some time to take a look, and I would find okay, imported section. We had model kits from Poland, you had model kits from Germany, you had model kits from other places, Brazil even. Um, it's not just like, since I'm talking about anime, it's not just Japanese models, but they had a few Japanese models, and some of them were very very different. Sci-fi looking um, creatures. Some of them were like the rubber suit monsters that Godzilla would fight. Or better example, I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but Ultraman came out. Well, came out earlier, but Ultraman I saw for the first time on public TV. It was PBS, and it was a black and white TV that I had, and so I watched Ultraman. I think it was Ultraman 3, something like that, for the first time in black and white. And well, they had model kits of Ultraman, or at least the creatures that looked like it would be for Ultraman, or Gamera, those type of monsters that Godzilla and Gamera would fight. Uh, I remember one villain, I think it was in a Gamera movie, where basically it was supposed to be these aliens, and these aliens were in the shape of a star, a 5-point star with a big eye in the middle. So it's basically like a starfish. They're just walking around, with a big eye and on their chest area right in the middle. So you had the pointed top, pointed areas for the arms, and pointed for the feet. Well, you had model kits for stuff like that, and some of them were robots. Some of them were very rounded looking robots, ball shaped with things. Some looked like they would be great for deep sea diving. Like they looked this. They had this very classic undersea type of architecture on for their armor and stuff, and made things look like they would be very strong for handling deep ocean pressure. So, well, there was one set of model kits that piqued my interest. And I think this was around 1985 or so. And this was my first introduction to Machine and Krieger. And so Machine and Krieger, I got some kits. Well, let's see if I have an unopened box kit. Yeah, I got one right here. So this one, well, I have opened the box before, but it's an unassembled kit. So I'm not going to like tilt it all around. So this was, the style of box. It was quite different than the rest of the boxes for the model kits. This is basically an unbleached, raw looking box. Everything else is was in glossy white cardboard, and maybe color pictures and things. But this was basically black and white, and some red highlights, or some of them just had just all black and just black and white pictures. And so everything had an old look to it, or a very rugged, like a crate type of look. And it caught my interest because it's quite different than anything else there. And but the models themselves, man, this chair. The models themselves were basically an armored suit, or an armored suit with some sort of winged jetpack attached to it. But it's not the classic jetpack that looks like a backpack. This was quite different. And everything had an old World War II look to it, and very mechanical. And so but these were expensive. Like something like that was like $80. And me, that age and stuff, it was just priced out of my reality. I would never be able to get something like $85 to buy a model kit with. Speaking of Robotech, got my SDF1 mug. I am a big Robotech fan. I say I'm big, but there's always a bigger fish. There's always someone who collects more. But speaking about anime and things, back then, 84, 85, I think, Robotech came out. Macross came out, I think, in 84 or a little bit before 84. And because they had a movie back in 84. And but when Robotech aired, it completely changed the perspective of me and my friends and how we saw cartoons and stuff. Back then, G.I. Joe was on the air. Transformers, Thundercats was good. And they had He-Man was also. So you come home from school, 3:30, something like that. Go straight to the TV and watch G.I. Joe. For me, G.I. Joe started to air at around 3:30. If I got there earlier, I might have seen another cartoon. After G.I. Joe, it was Transformers. Um, Sometimes, at one point, instead of Transformers, it was He-Man. I don't remember what channel had what, but all I remember is that it was. I think it was. I think for me, in New Orleans, I think the main thing was Channel 38. It was a newer station that came out during the 80s, and they kind of wanted to be like a cable channel. And when they first hit the air, they had like viewer discretion advised type things. And some movies that they had early on, you know, they showed everything. And but then they kind of mellowed out after a while. But they showed Robotech, and I think they showed G.I. Joe also. I'm not quite sure. Uh, but they had G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man in that order. Sometimes they'll have Thundercats. I don't remember where, but like G.I. Joe, Thundercats, He-Man, or something along those lines like that. Because there was a time where they didn't have that much Transformers, so Transformers had a pilot episode that came out. Everyone I knew watched it. They thought it was great. The toys hit the stores. People were buying the toys, but the regular series didn't come out till later. And I remember having a small little micro tape recorder, and I recorded the Transformers opening song. And then one day I was with it, and I was playing around with some G.I. Joe walkie-talkies, and then I could hear my neighbor. They were friends, and talking with their walkie-talkie, G.I. Joe, on the same frequency, and I could hear my friend's younger brother talking, and trying to time when to talk, and then press the button to release, or hold down when you want to talk and then release. And they were having some thing, but instead of me trying to talk to them and work it out, I just took out my little recording and I played back the Transformers opening song. I played that over the air through the walkie-talkie. And then once it finished, I just kind of silently listened, and I could hear my friend's younger brother, in a very kid voice. I hear Transformers, and everyone was like, "What? What?" They didn't believe him, and so he was trying to explain he heard Transformers on the walkie-talkie, and but no one else heard. So back then, just doing mischievous things. There was so anyway, going back to anime and things like that. So the 80s was the first time I got into science fiction conventions, and I went to my first science fiction convention, and it kind of opened the door about other things that are out there. So I was kind of blown away with the imported models. They look so different, It's not like your normal robot. Like, for example, okay, here, comic books, grab a comic book, there's Iron Man, it's a very humanoid looking, not a robot, but it's a very looking robot-like, person in an armored suit. And then you had ROM that came out, and that's, it's a robot there or android there, very, humanoid looking, basically a humanoid, armored uh, humanoid thing. It's got, one head, two arms, two legs, main body, main torso. Star Wars came out with all sorts of concepts with different types of looks for the droids. And I think Star Wars had a strong impact on the perception that a robot doesn't have to look like your typical Metropolis type robot. It could look different. I think Silent Running came out, I think, after, and that had a different looking droid on there. But I remember toys early on in the 70s, for example, and the classic looking robot. It's got a boxy head, boxy body, like from the Jetsons, okay, and with the boxy arms and everything, and chest opens up, and it's got some guns, boom, 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 boom. I remember stuff like that, and that was the classic shape of a robot that people talked about, and always a reference to Jetsons. And they had similar looking robots, and but Star Wars, introduced that you could have robots that looked like an astromech, or a power droid, or a small little bitty thing, mouse droid, things like that, other kinds of shapes. And so when I started to look at the Japanese model kits and things, they had different concepts on robots and robot looking things. It wasn't just your standard Western style robot. It was quite different. And then all of a sudden one day, I just had like the desire to actually go and build one of these model kits. Unfortunately, I didn't drive or anything like that back then. And but if they had Kmart back then, and Kmart had a decent toy section, and which included a decent model kit section. And I remember going to Kmart one time and seeing some very strange looking Japanese kits. All this just worked on my imagination, and so little by little, it just kept working on the imagination. Robotech came out. You ended up having the Zentradi battle pods and other things that looked quite different. And so it attracted me, and I got more and more involved. Well, fast forward all of that, into college years and beyond. Just it's just interesting how little things that you are introduced when you're younger influences your decisions later on in life. Like not career choices, but things that you use as tools for your career. I'll give you an example. Okay, um, I went to LSU for my undergraduate years. Well, I had to take Spanish as a second language thing. 'Cause it was part of a prerequisites. And but for electives, I took Japanese language, and I took Chinese language. Why? Well, because of previous interests, anime and other things like that from high school and earlier. And then from there, other kinds of things developed. It's like um, I'm just thinking. I don't want to get off track, so maybe some of these things are better for another broadcast. on a different theme. But yeah, well, you know, it's hard to really describe and say. But actually, if you think about it, the stuff that I do nowadays with things in DioWarriors, when it comes to 3D printing, does have links to, a lot of it has links to sci-fi influences, and a lot of that has the design style actually has foundations for me from my times being a fan of Robotech. I bought these books, uh, Robotech art books. They were basically Art 1, Art 2, and Art 3. They were basically books about the cartoon itself. And they just had each episode as, a breakdown of each episode. At the back of the book, and kind of like the appendix area, they would have line drawing artwork of the original sketches, and they'll have information about animation, some information, some background information. When I got into my first science fiction convention, and then became a second science fiction convention, and third, and so forth, um, around 1984, no, around 1988, there was a World Science Fiction Convention, a Worldcon, that visited New Orleans. It was, say they had 4 hotels that were dedicated um, to the convention displays itself. So people were dressed up. So you had American cosplays there. You had a lot of the vendors and all sorts of stuff. And it was only just for a few days, really. Uh, Maybe it was a week, 5 days, or something like that. And it was in downtown in New Orleans. And me, friends in high school, things like that, we made our way one way or the other to get to the convention as often as we could. And one thing that I bought over there was a book on animation by Kodak. So Kodak Publishing had a very, very good book about the history of animation. And I got that somewhere. It's a very good book. It was expensive. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was signed by the author. I didn't really care for that. I just, back in those days, I'm counting my pennies, especially at a convention. Uh, so I didn't need to have the extra expense for an author signed book. Anyway, I have it. I appreciate it, but back then I just wanted the book. And so it went into the details about how animation kind of changed over time, and how it kind of diverged uh, during World War II, or during and after World War II. How when the European economies, the European film industry was devastated because of the war. A lot of the European places resorted to animation because you control the setting, the actors, everything in animation. You don't have to worry about bombed out city. If you want a brand new city, you just draw it up. In real life, in reality, it was the cities were all in ruins and things. Um, so a lot of the studios, movie studios and stuff in Europe at that time resorted to animation for entertainment and things. Same thing with Japan. And in the US, things went different in a different direction. And we didn't suffer that type of devastation to our movie industry. And that's one reason why, if you look at movies in the 50s, like the Magnificent Seven, and you look at Akira Kurosawa's The Seven Samurai, One of them is in black and white. The Seven Samurai is in black and white. The quality of the film looks grainy. It looks like it's done with old cameras, like it was done in the 1940s or 1930s or something. It looks old. It looks aged. That's because they had to rely on older technology because a lot of the newer stuff were, damaged. They one way or the other they couldn't. They didn't have that modern movie industry that the U.S. had. The movies came out almost the same time, just a few years difference. I don't remember, like maybe 2-3 years difference, or maybe it was 6 years difference, something like that. But basically, it's within the same decade, and but one of them looks extremely aged. The other one looks, all in Technicolor, and that's because of the result of the war. Once one industry was devastated while the other was not. Same thing in Europe, and that's one reason why places like Japan, their animation industry matured in a different way and evolved in a different way. We had techniques that were done for Disney, so Japan eventually adopts their own style, and eventually they start doing their own techniques similar to Disney's techniques. But it becomes a different type of industry. Eventually, they surpass the techniques that Disney pioneered, and so in Japan, the animation industry took off in a completely different direction. It is one reason why in anime you can get silly things, like we do here with Looney Tunes. You can get silly things, and you can get things like Shakespeare um, and classic literature done in anime. So you end up having this you know, wide range of audiences that that you couldn't get here in, well, that they were not doing with anime or animation here in the U.S. So a lot of that is direct results from devastation from the war. Uh, you know, um, hmm. So, anyways, I got into Robotech and Macross and things like that around that time, and so some of the stuff that you see me doing, like the items and greebles that I do. Give you an example. Little greeble styles. Um, Maybe that's not the best example. I don't really have too many things done. Well, I have things like you know little areas for walls that I would attach later and things. A lot of the styles, if you notice, I'm not saying I'm duplicating, but it is influenced by like what I remember seeing in the sketches from like Macross and things like that. So it is interesting how things that I grew up with, kind of like going back in full circle. Another example of going back in full circle is action figures. Back in the 80s, I had no idea I would be involved doing, in my own toy industry right here. And back then I was just buying the figures and played with them. Now, as an adult, okay, um, just for impact purposes, I have a master's degree in information technology. So IT type stuff. I am a software engineer, And so I write, or I write programs. I can write Windows programs, graphical stuff. But I am involved in 3D design, and I'm doing things with action figures. It's amazing, really, because I grew up playing with these action figures, and now I'm going back and I'm designing things in support of them. And I just find that interesting and amazing at the same time. Um, so anyways, I'm going to make this one a little bit on the short side. It's almost 1 hour, and I am feeling a little bit on the tired side. It's been a full day for me, and I still have a few items to do still. I'm just waiting now for this print to get over, and then I'll be able to clean up the parts and bag them and set them out for shipping tomorrow. Um, well, with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up this video, this broadcast. And well, I just want to say thank you for joining me. And I don't see there's any comments. I forget to check. Okay. And let me check real fast with Facebook. I don't see anything there. And I don't see anything on the other posts. So, okay. So anyway, well, I just want to say thanks for joining me and listening to me kind of talk and reminisce. And next time I'll try to change things up a little bit and maybe do a little bit of CAD stuff at the same time while I while we talk about something else. And that's about it. Okay, well, thanks. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk with you all later.